Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chad Novak, and I'm here on behalf of the Saskatchewan Taxpayers Advocacy Group, which is a grassroots organization proudly standing up for individual rights of Regina taxpayers and Saskatchewan overall. I'm here today to, first of all, say a giant thank you to the German Club for everything that they have done over the past several years and continue to do. And I know it's a hard fight, and I think that they're worthy of commendation for that. Couple of things. I'm going to actually open it up today with the asks that I have of this committee and explain a little bit as to why I believe that those are reasonable. The first one is that I think that we need to make sure that we do not defer this project any further. I know that's one of the recommendations, that we defer at least a part of it until to a future date. I think this is a dangerous thing because that means indefinitely, and they've already waited long enough. And second thing is, it says when funding sources are identified. That was what the administration was required to do today, actually 3 months ago, was to come back to you with the funding source. It's not their problem, it's not my problem, it's not taxpayers' problem as to why they didn't come back today with that. That was their decision. So second thing is, I think that even though I have high doubts in terms of what the quoted cost is, even if it is that much, 100% funding should be done now. The project should be done as soon as possible and take it out of the $9.8 million surplus that you had last year. You had no problems approving economic development Regina with $100,000, even though they did not need that money. You had no problems with helping the parking lot at Candy Cane Park, which I'm on the fence about, and you had no problems with paratransit funding, which I fully support. So, I mean, $9.8 million, if you consider how much we've actually accumulated over the past decade, that's over $60 million in free money, essentially. You know, this is money that the taxpayers deserve to have some say in. So I think $500,000 deferred over indefinite is not fair to the German Club, it's not fair to Regina, and therefore I think that this is something that needs to be changed within this recommendation. And finally, my final ask is that we please add a motion or a statement on there, or one of the councillors add a motion in the future that we consider to adopt a public art policy. This is something that over 300 American cities have currently, over 50 Canadian cities have currently. We don't. We have the cultural policy, which is cool, but we don't have a public art policy. Things like this, things like the museum last year, wouldn't have a question. I think it's socially responsible and it's fiscally responsible. I think that you'll have a good support by our tax base, by our residents, to do such a thing. Now, speaking in terms of why I feel that this is important, I'm not going to talk about how we got here, because that's really not here nor there. We can't do anything about that at this meeting, unfortunately. However, I do know that an obvious admission from this report is exactly how much it was expected to cost to refurbish the Glockenspiel back in 2010 when it was dismantled. And I will not buy the excuse that we don't know, because it was stated in this report even today that, quote unquote, funds were not immediately available to complete repairs, so the Glockenspiel remained in storage in a secure city facility. So obviously, if we knew funds weren't available for it, we had to know how much it would have cost. And therefore, I think that's a key disclosure that needs to happen, so that the taxpayers understand exactly how much disrepair happened since the time it was dismantled. The very fact that this issue is before you today, and other art policies or other art questions like the museum came to you in the past, is a great example of why we need a public art policy. I think this is long past its time. I think that it would get tremendous community support. And honestly, it doesn't necessarily say we're going to put so much money into so many things. It's going to define those parameters that we continue to come back and spend however countless hours of administration time, taxpayer time, and your time. As I mentioned, as for funding, I believe that we should take it out of the 2016 surplus, which is projected at $9.8 million. Since we didn't consider, since that's all free money, $500,000 will not make a hill of beans of difference, and I think it's important that it gets done. It sets a positive tone in the sense that we're willing to address these situations. And this is talking about the cultural aspect. We're also talking about truth and reconciliation. Well, this is another example where we're trying to be respectful of cultural, and we're trying to be respectful in terms of being proactive. Okay. And finally, I think that this it is stated in here that we're looking at possibly going into the 2018 capital budget and thereafter. I think that this ought to have been included in at least as a line item in the 2017 budget, and the reason being that this issue has been ongoing for years. It was actually raised by Councillor Flavel, thank you, in September 2016, and it was actually supposed to come back to administration in December 2016. Now, this report confirms that the city has definitely been aware of this need since it was irresponsibly dismantled for this plaza in 2010. So I thank you for your time, and I will gladly welcome any questions you may have for me on this. Perfect, thank you.